Okay guys, so these are notes on ratios and proportions, still solving equations, but ratios and proportions. So this right here kind of breaks down some an algebraic way to solve a proportion, right? I should back up. First of all, proportion is an equation that states one fraction equals another fraction. So all these, right? If one fraction equals another fraction, that's called a proportion. And the way we're going to solve that is by cross multiplying. So we're going to multiply a times b in this case, and it's going to equal b times c. So in the first problem here, cross multiplying would be 63 times 5, and that would equal x times 7. You could probably skip this step and just multiply it from the get-go. So 5 times 63, 315 equals 7x. Divide both sides by 7, and you'll have the answer. Right, divide both sides by 7, you should get 45. 7 times 45 would be 315. Here on this one, when we cross multiply 20 times x and 30 times x minus 10, we will have to distribute 30 into the x minus 10. That will equal 20 times x. So distributing, I'll get 30x minus 30 times 10 is 300. That equals 20x. Normally let me get that on screen. Normally I'd subtract the 20x to end up with a positive value of x, but since the x over here is already by itself, I'm going to subtract 30x as my next step. So 20 minus 30 is negative 10, and then if you divide both sides by negative 10, you'll have your answer. You can cross a 0 out if you want. Negative 30 divided by negative 1 is going to give me a positive 30 for x. Going to keep moving here. Pretty much going to solve most of these by cross multiplying, if not all of them. So 10 times 3 equals 2 times x, so 2 times x is 2x. 10 times 3 is 30, so you could multiply, kind of mental math multiply. Even if you use a calculator, you could multiply without having to actually write down the multiplication. So divide by 2, x equals 15. On this one, you should make up a proportion and solve it and write down the steps as it states. So I could just make up whatever I want. Z over 5 equals 7 over anything I want. I'm going to go 30 here. So if I cross multiply here, I'll get 30z equals 35. And I'll divide both sides by 30. And I'm actually not going to divide, I'm just going to leave my answer a fraction. 35 divided by 30, I can reduce by dividing by 5, so 7 6, z equals 7 6. Write down my steps. First, I cross multiply. When I cross multiply, second, I set my cross products equal, right? When you cross multiply, you get what's called cross products. So you set those equal, as we've been doing in these last few problems. Equal. And then third, I solve it, right? So first cross multiply, second set the cross products equal, third solve the equation, right? So there's that. This next one is a proportional problem. Right, there's some questions here. What would it look like to set up a proportion for this problem? What values go where? Just kind of some things to think about. What is a written example of a consistent setup? So consistent setup simply means this. If I'm going to set up a proportion, I could do that here. The property tax on the house is whose assessed value is 65,000 is 825. So again, the value of the home is 65,000. The property taxes are 825. And using that same ratio, basically, I'm going to determine the tax on a house with a value of 180,000. So like basically I already know that it's 65,000 compared to 180. It's already almost 3 times the amount, so the taxes will be almost 3 times the amount because it's a proportional relationship. So I can set this up as the value. This would be a consistent setup, by the way. Just put the value of the home over the tax amount, and then set that equal to the value of the next home against the tax amount of that home. So with this in mind, I can take the $65,000 value and I can put that over the tax of $825, and then I can take the value of the other home, which would be $180,000. Notice both values go in the numerator. I have to be consistent with what unit I put in the numerator. And then, well, what is the tax on that home, right? We don't know, so we're going to cross multiply and use the proportion here to figure out the tax on the $180,000 home. So 65,000 times T, that's 65,000 T, of course. And then when I cross multiply 825 times 180,000, I get a really large number. It's well, this is what it is. I believe it's 148 million. Again, that's multiplying 825 times 180,000. 148,500,000. That's what I got. And now in my next step, I'll divide by 65,000. And if you divide by 65,000, you should get that the taxes on this house are $2,284.62. So here I'm asking you guys to make up a question. I'm just trying to introduce this this idea of questioning, like whether I have a question or not. Making up a question could definitely help my learning. So I'm gonna refer you to Bloom's taxonomy. If you look up Bloom's taxonomy, which is a link in this assignment, it has question starters, so you could use that link to look at Bloom's levels of questioning, and you can use those as question starters to make up a question about this topic. Again, even if you don't have a question, it kind of still helps your learning. So anyhow, I'll do this next problem the same as the last one, where it's going to be the value of the home. Let's see, value is 45,000, tax is 600. To determine the tax on a home, that's 112,500. So again, I'll take the value of the home, the first home, put that over the tax amount, and I'll take the value of the second home, and I'll put that over my variable because I'm trying to find the tax on this second home. So cross multiply, 45,000 times T, 45,000 T, and then if you multiply 600 times 112,500, that'll be a large number. Let's see what it is. Use a calculator. Kind of ran out of space here, but it came out to 67,500,000. And now if I divide both sides by 45,000, what I'll get is the taxes on this home are $1,500. So $1,500 are the taxes, as I'm saying here. It's the tax on that home. The next problem, still using proportions. Wildlife biologists catch, tag, and release 135 deer back into it. So they caught the deer and then they released them back into the refuge, 135 of them. 2 weeks later, they observe a sample of 140 deer, 30 of which are tagged. 30 of them have the tags that they had originally put on 135 deer. So anyhow, assuming the ratio of tagged deer in the sample holds true for all deer in the refuge, approximately how many deer are there in the refuge? So what we're going to do is we're going to make a proportion that has, like, let's say all deer versus tagged deer, right? So the premise is they didn't tag all the deer. They tagged 135 of them, and there's a bunch more basically. So all deer would be, let's see, when they looked at the second time 140 deer, there was 30 tags. So the second time they looked, 140 would represent all the deer, and tagged there was only 30 that had tags. So, but remember, initially they tagged 135 deer, so remember tagged goes on bottom. I'll put all deer on top and tagged on bottom. So initially they tagged 135 deer, and then this right here would represent all the deer in the refuge. So we're using the sample that they saw. They saw a sample of 140 deer, 30 were tagged. And then since we know they tagged 135 to begin with, we can use that total number of tagged deer to figure out how many total deer there are in the refuge. So again, using the all deer over the tagged deer. They observed 140, there was 30 tagged, and initially they tagged this many deer, and we'll use that to figure out how many deer there are in the refuge. So anyhow, hopefully that's not too confusing. If it's confusing at all, 30 times D, 30D, 140 times 135. Let's use a calculator. 140 times 135 is 18,900. And if you divide both sides here by 30, you should get that there is 630 total deer. 630 total deer in this refuge. And the next one is very similar. So in this one, same thing. They catch, tag, and release 120 deer. 2 weeks later, they observe 150, 25 of which are tagged, assuming the ratio of tagged deer. So same thing as the last one, guys. So I'm going to take that 150 total over the 25 tagged, right? They observed 150, 25 were tagged. Well, how many total deer are there in the refuge if 120 total are tagged? So again, it's total deer versus tagged deer just in the sample, and then total deer versus total tagged deer in the entire refuge. So cross multiply, 25 times D, that's easy, and then 150 times 120, again calculator time, 18,000, and we'll divide 18,000 by 25, and that comes to 720 deer in the refuge. So, fairly straightforward lesson, guys. Definitely go over it and then do the practice problems. And then if you can, check out the Bloom's taxonomy for levels of questioning. Thanks.